that across this morning, the link for tonight. Everyone else will be getting their link around about 2:30 this afternoon. So I'll be able to send yours in advance of that. That's not a problem. Just pop that in chat. Nick, yes, please.
Yeah. Can I ask a similar question in the same vein?
Yes.
Am I in for tonight's session? I believe I should be, but I paid for last week's twice, but stupidly, I don't know why.
Okay.
I did, but I just want to make sure I'm in for tonight.
Okay, Nick, can you just pop your email address in chat for me, and I'll check that out as well.
Thank
And
you
make
so
sure you
much.
send the link.
Sorry for interrupting.
No problem at all.
Full house this morning. Loving it.
It is. Lisa is just having a quick bite. Lisa, just to let you know, yes, I saw your email. I've had a bit of a rubbish weekend, but I will get onto that and get back to you with that.
Are you there, Jeanette?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good morning.
Yeah,
Oh,
you sounded not very happy about it.
All covered up in cold.
Welcome home.
Absolutely.
Welcome home.
Oh dear, never mind.
Hello, Leah's flashing at us again.
Is he flashing again? He does do
Yeah.
that a lot, Leon, doesn't he?
Yeah,
He is a permanent flasher.
he likes to get our attention. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think Susie on my screen is just above him today, so maybe she's not going to get infected, but you never know. It does get passed around, that flashing.
Good morning, Sam. Nice to see you here this morning.
Yeah, morning, Sam. Morning, Andrew. Morning, Kenny.
Good
Morning,
morning.
John. Morning, Susie, Susan, Jamie, Nick, Kenny,
Thanks.
Scott, Leon Z, Jeanette, Lisa, Gary, and Sue. Good morning. And good morning to you, Di.
Good morning, Sarah. Good morning.
And
good
what are we up
morning.
to today?
I believe we're on session 7 today.
Fabulous.
Over halfway. Over halfway. It's all downhill from here.
It is indeed.
Okay, I'm sure that Lisa can catch us up when she gets herself sorted out. Sue Yates is on test this morning, so she's just listening in this morning. So she's just she's here, but she's not here, if you know what I mean. Okay, guys. So we are going to start where we always start, please, and that is at the beginning of your course book on page 8. And we'll have a look at module 7. So they will be getting an email with a link to a webinar on how to prepare for the session, and an email with a link to a webinar on the theory of planned behavior. Always full of good intentions. Cool. Okay, page 70 from module 7 in the course book.
Is that 17, yeah?
70, yep.
70,
In my course
right.
book, yeah, in my course book, 70. I think it should be the same as yours now. Found one hanging around. As you
Module
do.
7, yeah, got it.
Got it. Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Okay, so looking at it from the PDI's point of view then. So they've got their online material and the content of module 7. In this module, you'll continue to develop your driving skills, develop your ability to give a commentary, develop your instructional ability. You will also be developing your ability to give instruction. planning lessons on meeting, crossing, adequate clearance, overtaking, and using anticipation, and watching a video on the theory of planned behavior. And then it has a paragraph there about using the marking sheets for their own self-assessment. And it does say that even if you've passed your part 2, it is necessary to maintain a high standard of driving using the developed driving assessment, and this will allow you to monitor your standard. Because if they do pass their part 2, we then don't want their driving to go back downhill again. It's really important that we keep our standards up. Personally, I make sure that I do advanced driving tests just to make sure my standard is where it needs to be. Yeah, because otherwise we pick up bad habits and we lose that best practice, you know, and we stop noticing things because we don't do them ourselves. Now, does that make sense? So it's really important that we keep our driving standard top notch. Top notch. Right, so planning lessons. Throughout the ticket course, you'll be building portfolio, prepare lessons on meeting, crossing, overtaking, leaving adequate clearance, and using anticipation. You will find that during this session and in future sessions, whenever we're talking about these subjects, we talk about coming in conflict with other vehicles. And that's basically what this is. So anything to do with meeting, crossing, overtaking, leaving adequate clearance, or using anticipation is when we come in conflict with other vehicles. Okay, turning over the page then, we have an outline for in-car session 7. And then turning over the page again, we have a developed driving assessment. We have the old Part 3 assessment sheet and the new Part 3 assessment sheet, followed by an action plan. So no exercises for them to do in this module, just a lot of lesson planning. Not too content heavy this time around. Okay, so
Sorry, can I just ask, would we
you can.
looking at the lesson plans that they've developed and answering questions on those in case
Yeah, I think just in the course of whenever you're doing a platform, Susan,
yeah.
I think it's a good idea just to have it's not a detailed look at their lesson plans, but just make sure they've got the key learning points there and there's some sort of order to them, you know. But I wouldn't go into them too much detail. I just don't have time to.
No.
You know, because we're not at this stage, we're not listening to briefings or anything like that. But it's just making sure those key learning points are there.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay. All right, so we're now looking for our trainer's guidance notes, and we're looking for in-car session 7. If somebody finds a page in your book, can you let other people know what page it's on, please?
71.
30.
Oh, that book. Sorry, got that wrong. 30.
30. Okay. Right, so in-car session 7, we'll just run through the learning outcomes. So by the end of the session, the trainee will know what needs developing in their driving and with their commentary, how the core competencies of fault identification, analysis, and remedy underpin their instruction, using conflict situations as the platform. how to use timely and appropriate verbal or physical interventions, and how to use effective questioning techniques. So we've got 4 learning outcomes, and the 5th one we know comes about by filling out the action plans.
Mhm.
How many of those are competencies, please? 1 says Susie, 1 says Jamie. Everyone is saying 1, or has anybody got anything different? Fabulous, we're getting it. Nice. Good, good. Can anybody identify it for me, please?
Verbal or physical intervention.
Excellent, good. So we are still in risk management, aren't we? We've had a look at 3 of them, and this is a 4th one. Good. So usual introduction, discuss their progress over the last couple of weeks, refer to their action plans and the ticket course book. All right, so we need to make sure they're on top of their action plans, that they are moving forward with them and not just sort of writing them and then forgetting them, because that's their development, isn't it? And they are responsible for that. And then we got a goal set for the whole session, and then of course we goal set for each individual learning outcome. Okay. So what needs developing in their driving and their commentary? We're going to assess the driving and complete a marking sheet that develop driving competence during the assessment drive, and then ask for 10 minutes of commentary. Okay, so not too much detail, as I said last time. If at this stage they want more training on part 2 stuff, then that is above and beyond what's in the course. All right, so they would need to pay you more really for your time. Give them time to go back to the action plans, and then we will be moving into the next learning outcome. And this one is how core competencies underpin their instruction using conflict situations as a platform. So we're going to have a look at the lesson plans, make sure those learning outcomes are there. And then we need to discuss with them how learning takes place around the goal. How does learning take place around the goal? Can anybody come up with a definition of how learning takes place around the goal? How do people learn? Yes, Penny.
By questioning them and finding out what they know and developing from there by asking further questions and seeing if you can draw out from them rather than just telling them.
I want you to think about their action plans. Okay. What do we do before we ask them to fill out their action plans?
Reflect.
Well, they're doing that in the action plans, aren't
right.
they? What do they do before we go to the action plans?
Analyze.
Practice, don't we?
Practice, yeah.
We practice, yeah?
Yeah.
So the way people learn is through practice or self-experimentation, reflection, development. Yeah. That's how people learn. So we don't mind if they make faults when they are working towards their goal within the goal, provided we keep the car safe. Because that's how people learn. Yeah. So provided they're not going to crash a car, let them make mistakes when they're trying to achieve the goal. But outside of that goal, it's our job to prevent anything else from happening, isn't it? Yeah. So we don't let anything happen outside of the goal. But they could make as many mistakes as they like when trying to achieve their goal. It's really important that we, differentiate between goal and risk. Yeah. So that, we know that people do not learn through core competencies. Nobody likes to forever being told, you've done that wrong, you've done that wrong, you've done that wrong. People don't learn that way. They learn through having a go at it, experimenting with it, reflecting on it,
Repeating.
and then development. And that's what we do around the goal. Yeah.
I
Does
definitely
everybody
think,
go on?
sorry,
John?
Di. I definitely think I've put that more into my training with PDIs. I've
Perfect.
seen a massive difference, and I did some training with some ADIs as well, and the difference that they're seeing now, working more. Now I understand it a lot more, that risk management outside the goal it does make a massive difference.
Perfect. Thank you for that, John. Good. Okay. We are then also comparing talk through, dealing with faults, and then backing off with instruction. I think this is what somebody was talking about. I think it might have been you, Lisa, where you were talking about those levels of instruction. Yeah, the talk through, prompt and independent. Well, it does come in, and this is what I was saying to you, but it comes in a slightly different way. All right. And it's vital that they understand how to use those core competencies. So that was just a summary, really, of of this learning outcome. So if you just want to have a quick read through it, guys, have a look at the exercises, and then at the end of it, if there's any questions, if anybody's got anything they want to discuss, then I can try and sort that for you. Okay, so we can see then that the point of this exercise is really to compare. Yeah, the first exercise is about old style instruction. Can you see that? Old style instruction. And the second exercise is showing them how people learn through practice, reflection, and development. Okay, so the first one might be risk management, mightn't it? In a way. And the second one is around the goal. Does everybody get that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. So the second exercise, what we want them to do is to go through all the competences they already know. So what do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve it? Where do you want to practice it? How long do you want to spend on it? How much help do you want with it? And also the sharing of risk. And then practice, which is why we always have routes no longer. I mean, nobody should be driving for longer than 10 minutes without stopping and reviewing their progress. So short, repeatable routes for the practice, in silence if possible, unless you have to input, because it's necessary to. And then pull up, reflect what went well, what didn't go so well, develop what are you going to try this time, or what needs to happen now. Yeah. If you're unsure what we're talking about here, please let me know, because it's the crux of what we're talking about. Great, good. Good. Has anybody got any questions about that exercise?
It's quite a short period, isn't it? 10 minutes. There's not many people, I don't think, out of probably a lot of instructors, who go 10 minutes stop, 10 minutes stop.
No, they don't.
It's quite a thing to get a hang of. And since I've started doing these courses and talking with Terry and all of that, pulling over is so much of the job, and I never used to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you used to think, well, people want value for money, we need to keep driving, but how much do they learn in that?
Exactly.
How much do they take in, and how much just goes out the window? And
yeah,
it's quite amazing when you start
Yeah.
doing it the other way around.
Exactly, because the learning takes place actually at the side of the road.
Yeah,
That's where the learning takes place, and then they just go and practice what they've learned.
yeah. And when you sort of do it and you start noticing it, it really makes a difference.
Yeah,
They understand, and they can tell you what is going on.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is, Nick, so many driving lessons are about a topic and not about setting goals. So many driving instructors do not understand how to set goals with their customer. So what they will do is they say, this week we're going to do roundabouts, and they drive round an awful lot of roundabouts.
Hmm.
They have no idea what learning is going on. There's no review of that learning. And at the end of the lesson, they tell the pupil how well they've done on roundabouts.
Right.
Without any input from the pupil as to, well, actually, I was terrified on 3 of them. I guessed which lane to be in. You seem to think it was all right, but it was only a guess. I don't know if I'll be able to do it again right next time again, because they're not being asked. They're not actually setting smart goals. So you can achieve an awful lot by breaking that learning down on a lesson, so that you are achieving a goal, another goal, another goal, another goal. Yeah. And learning is happening, and you're helping them to evaluate themselves, so they understand that learning is happening. They know that they've gone from a point of not knowing to a point where they do know.
Yeah.
Rather than they've just had a lesson on, I've now done roundabouts, I've now done parking.
Yeah, and they've got 4 or 5 goals out of them, out,
Mm,
which makes them feel better. It's good.
absolutely.
No, that's cool. Thank you.
You're facilitating learning rather than trying to pour in teaching.
Yeah,
Because trying to pour in teaching to a pupil whose hands are like this, then they're only going to catch little tiny bits of it.
Hmm.
Most of it's going to go straight through. You're going to collect it in a jug at the bottom, and next week you're going to pour it all in again.
Yeah,
Hope that a couple of fingers have stuck together this time.
yeah. No, that's fair shout.
Yeah, thanks for that observation, Nick. That's good.
Mm.
And I'm glad it's working for you too.
Yeah, no, my lessons, I think, since I started coming on these things, and I've done, a couple of the other things with you as well. And yeah, I think my lessons over the last year are totally different to how they used to be, because they're just structured in a totally different way.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
My, like your trigger points and all that sort of thing, my pass rate has gone up. So yeah.
I think it's more satisfying, not only for the pupil, because they're getting out the car feeling like they've achieved something, instead of getting out the car thinking, oh God, I'm never going to get this. And it's more satisfying for the instructor because they know they've taught them something.
Yeah.
They know they've actually learned something.
Yeah, you see the glee on their face. So
Absolutely, they can't wait. Yeah. Yeah, they're almost skipping away from the car.
yeah,
Sort of head down, go, "Woo."
yeah, all good.
Yeah, good. Good. All right. So they've probably got lots to reflect on this one. So they need to go back to their action plans and do their own reflection after the practice. Okay, so if you're happy with that, then we will move on to the next learning outcome. And this is our competency of how to use timely and appropriate verbal and physical interventions. All right, so we're going to pop you into breakout rooms. And this is really just a refresher for you, all right, because we've talked about it loads now. So it's just really a bit of a refresher for you to make sure everybody's on the same page. When we're talking about verbal and physical intervention, the first question I want to ask is, at what point does something become safety critical? So during that, going through your risk management stages, at what point would you class something as safety critical? So that's the first question. Yes, Jeanette. You've got to go into breakout rooms, Jeanette, so I don't need an answer right now.
That's right, okay.
All right. Okay. The second thing that I would like you to discuss, please. What is the difference, or how would you deal with faults around the goal compared to faults when you're dealing with risk? Okay.
Could you repeat that again, please, Di?
I can. I'd like you to discuss the difference really between how you deal with faults around the goal compared to how you deal with faults around the risk. Okay. How long would you like for this, guys? How long do you think you need?
An hour and a half?
How about 15 minutes? How about 15 minutes? I'll be kind. Okay, so 15 minutes. Yep.
See you
So I
then.
want to know when something becomes safety critical and the difference between faults around the goal and faults around the risk.
No, it's a thinner one. It's the same as that, but thinner.
See you all in 15.
See you in 15.
Yeah.
Bye, 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 bye.
See,
Guys.
morning, Zay.
How are we?
Morning. Good, good.
Did you get your bite to eat, mate?
Yes.
You got some crumbs around your mouth there.
I double checked before I came on camera.
Damn it.
I was just trying to shovel it all in. I'm starving.
Okay, so excuse me. When does a situation become safety critical? For me, it's I think it's when a situation is developing ahead, and it's something that perhaps you would have dealt with, would have started dealing with earlier.
Yeah.
And because if the student doesn't start dealing with it, then obviously you need to then intervene. I think that's when it becomes safety critical.
Yeah, so either they don't understand the severity or they don't know how to deal with the risk.
Yeah, or they don't recognise the risk at all.
Yeah, for instance, if they're not putting a routine in place and they're just charging into maybe a roundabout or a junction that you can see that's developing before they're slamming on the brakes, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's when it's, in a nutshell, it's when it becomes clear that the student
isn't going to intervene.
They're not going to deal with it. They haven't recognised the fault, or as you said, they're not recognised the severity of the risk. So that's, for me, when it starts becoming safety critical. So if I've been paying attention, if I've had enough sleep, you might have time to ask a question like, for instance, in meeting situations, is there enough space there for us both to go through? And if I don't get anything which is convincing, if they say no, there isn't, then I might say, okay, what's the plan? If it's too late, I think this comes into the second question as well. If it's too late, then I'll tell them what to do.
Yeah. I think with it being safety critical as well, it depends on what's happened, because if you can see it in advance, like a meeting situation, something's changed, then you can deal with it. But if it's maybe a car randomly, I don't know, pulls off with no indication, then they're not going to have the reactions to deal with it that we do as experienced drivers.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just don't have that ability to do the kind of the pre-management because other drivers genuinely suck.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff they do.
Yeah. Okay. So in a nutshell, then what we're saying is when we feel that the student isn't going to be able to, hasn't recognised or hasn't realised the risk soon enough to be able to deal with it effectively, or they haven't recognised it at all.
Yeah, I think it's down to timing, isn't it, with both? Because if it's a random issue, it happens too quickly. And then on the other flip side of that, like you said, they either don't recognise all the severity of it or they don't know how to deal with it. Do they mean though, is when they say, when does it become safety critical? Do they mean like maybe if we've not done our job very well?
Possibly. This might tie into what I was saying before. I think that a lot of risks can be managed. I think if you're planning, if you see something developing earlier than the student, then you can ask those coaching questions. Okay, what's happening ahead? Just getting them to look ahead.
Yeah.
And if it seems evident that they haven't recognised it, or they haven't, like I say, I haven't realised the severity of it, then that's when you would give a verbal command. So like, for instance, today I had a lesson before the course today. One of the students, she
she wasn't steering enough. She was steering too late, and she wasn't steering enough to get herself around the vehicles. And so on the first one or two occasions, I had to say, steer more to the right, steer more to the right. And then when we got a chance to kind of pull in, and this I think ties into the second question, faults around the goal and faults around the risk. The goal for the lesson was trying to make progress, but she then had issues with the steering. The way I managed that was I had a brief conversation with her about it. I said, look, notice you're not steering enough, and it was an issue that was also present in her steering out of junctions, left turns as well. So I addressed that one, to be honest with you. We talked about the issue of steering too late, getting too close to parked vehicles, hitting parked vehicles, etc. And then I just did like I mentioned, the fault analysis, the remedy, and all that sort of stuff. I think if it's something which is potentially safety critical, I think you need to address it. Maybe even change the goal of the lesson.
So, with the difference between the faults around the goal and faults around the risk, what you're saying is we identify the faults around the risk, but then as long as we've addressed it, we kind of move on and maybe say, do you know what, we'll take a better look at that on your next lesson.
Could do, but the problem there is that it'll keep, if the issue isn't resolved, or if you don't find some kind of resolution. So you could, I guess, say, you know, for now, would you like me just to guide you through and give you some support when managing parked vehicles, or would you like to have a go at it by yourself? If you haven't said anything about it, or if you say we're going to deal with it next time, then that fault will keep on occurring.
Yeah, but that's where our risk management would come in then, wouldn't it? So we'd have to manage that risk around the parked vehicles for them to achieve their goal of progress, like yours today. Yeah. And then I'd say, okay, so obviously we've recognised that clearance of the parked vehicles is an issue. So would you like to have a look at that on the next lesson?
Yeah, but for now, would you like me to?
Yeah.
Would you like me to guide you through it and remind you just to, so that they're not having to think about that so much?
That's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with that, it would say the difference between them is you identify the faults around the risks, move on and put a plan in just to maybe, like you say, change the level of instruction, but ultimately you stick to your goal. Faults around the goal, well, like she said, you just let them have a go and try and figure it out for themselves, don't they?
Yeah. So this ties in nicely with what she said, that you deal with the risk and the faults which might be occurring. So the example of the clearance with parked vehicles here, just steer out a bit earlier before you arrive, if that's what you agreed, and then they can focus on the goal of making progress.
Yeah. So faults around the goal, allow to make mistakes.
You know what can be really, really difficult though is that, you know, if the student's having a particularly bad lesson and they're making errors and faults all over the place, what do you do in that situation? Because I had one last week, and the student, he was having a right
mare.
Yeah, on any type of road, quiet roads, busy roads, and they were having a bad lesson. And it's like I can't even remember everything. And it's like, what the hell do we do? So I just kind of picked one. Say, look, you know, I'll pick whatever I can remember. I think I need a notepad, you know.
It is hard sometimes. It's like I've got one student that I can do this kind of structure really well with, because she just works really well with it. And then I've got some students who just seem to do everything wrong. And I'm like, where am I focusing this? Like, this. It's
Yeah.
too much. I'm still on
Sorry,
the right.
guys. Postman was at the door
No,
worries.
that's fine.
and the dogs were barking.
I know you were setting off my dog. My dog was about to go. There he was.
We were just saying, Michael, we were just talking about when students if they're having a particularly bad lesson and they're making all sorts of faults all over the place, that it can actually become quite challenging to maintain focus on the goal, because you've got, they've broke too sharp before the junction, or they've overshot the junction, and then the position was bad and the steering was the problem, and then they didn't pick up speed. It's like, what are you supposed to look at? How are you supposed to keep to the goal when they're making so many different errors in
Yeah,
so
I think
many
it's
different
about
areas?
time to pull up. That's the time to pull up.
Yeah, well, you can pull up, but then the point is that what do you do then with the structure of the lesson? Because you could have 3 or 4 safety critical faults which they've committed. You can't look at everything all at once.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Pick the
Would
worst
you
one.
Yeah, that's what I
Would
do.
you say you need to break it down? Just take one at a time.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Choose the one that scared you the most first. And then work on from there.
All of them in that lesson.
Yeah.
So
Just ask him what was the most scariest thing that happened within the last 10 minutes.
yeah. What made you crap your pants, and we'll work on that.
And if they say nothing, that's even more scarier.
Yeah. Just say, oh, did we say 2 hours today? I only meant half an hour. We'll just call
it quits after 10 minutes. You're not having a good day today.
Oh, sorry, someone's calling me. I've got to go. We'll pick this back up next week.
Yeah.
I do find it harder sometimes when you haven't maybe had a good sleep. You know, when you said earlier, it depends if you've had enough sleep.
Yeah.
I definitely find that with this job. Like, if you've had a bit of a rough night, and especially if you've got a challenging student, it really just sucks the life out of you quite quickly.
Yeah.
And you do almost just think, should we just go and do a manoeuvre safely in a car park?
Yeah.
It's normally the last lesson that gets me. The last lesson, your awareness is probably not where it should be as well.
Yeah.
You're trying to, but
I also find that, if you've had one challenging student, and then the one after that feels challenging, and then the one after that feels, by the time you get to lunchtime, thinking, bloody hell, is the day not over yet?
Yeah. Can I phone in sick?
Do you ever get that though? If you're tired or not feeling your best, do you ever find that your students don't have very good lessons either?
Yeah. And I think that is down to the risk management or, delayed instructions and stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got to realise we're only human, so we just have to do our best.
Yeah.
I definitely do think I see on some of the instructor pages sometimes on Facebook when they're on about, how many hours does everybody work? And when you say you work like a 30-hour week or whatever, it doesn't sound an awful lot in conventional jobs where I've run restaurants and I could do 60, 70 hours. But 30 hours of pure concentration is just exhausting.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the moment, my week's a 52-hour week.
Wow, gee whiz.
But that's because I'm also training my wife. So I'm hoping once she's on board, I can obviously just throw a load over to her.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at the moment, this is probably the hardest I've found the job. It's really mentally draining.
Yeah, when I told my wife that when I come home after a long day, I'm shattered. She's like, all you do is sit there all day, twiddling your thumb, say, go right, go left. And I'm now training her as well. She came in on a lesson with me, and let's just say it was an eye opener for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the wife said to me, she's like, hats off to you.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the level of patience as well with some of them. You really have to grit your teeth and then find a way to get the answer out of them. And it is literally like talking to kids sometimes. Just think, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going back in. I've just put faults around goals, so allowed to make mistakes and self-evaluation, faults around the risk, identify analysis, and remedy, normally by instruction to help them get through until maybe you can pick it up the next lesson.
Yeah, yeah. I think from what I can remember from training that we've had, I think the key thing was to make mention of it, even if it's not goal or on the goal.
Yeah, at least identify it and then say, you know, we'll put a pin in that and we'll come back.
First back, fastest finger first. Fabulous.
We scared Sam away. He run out.
I think I just pressed the button there, but reflex.
Great. Okay, so we're looking at
starting route to Plymouth. Head south, skip Acre Avenue, then turn left onto Zamenhof Grove.
where are we turning?
Sorry.
What are we doing?
And where are we off to, Gary?
Where are we off to?
Oh, I was just checking a location here. Somebody in the group, Andrew, I think, says that he lives in Plymouth. I've never been there, so I was just checking it on my maps. And again, press the button.
Taking us all to Plymouth. How nice. Good. Okay. Right. So we're talking about the differences then. So when does something become safety critical? If we think about your sequence of risk management, and how do we deal with faults around the goal compared to how we deal with them around the risk? So, Sarah, you've got the groups, or
I
I've got
have.
the groups.
Yeah, no, I've got them. So room 1, we've got Jamie, Jeanette, Penny and Sue. And do we have a spokesperson? Who was that?
That's me.
Fabulous, thank you.
Right, so point that something becomes safety critical, we've got it as it's when you're watching the pupil and you're thinking to yourself, well, they should be taking action with the situation that's coming ahead, and they don't. That's when it becomes safety critical and you need to step in, whether you've got time to do it verbally or physically, depends on the situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yep.
So we discussed the difference between the faults around the goal and the faults around the risk, and we come up with faults around the goal are what you're expecting the student to deal with and how they're going to improve themselves with those faults. And the faults around the risk is what you need to deal with as the instructor.
Nice. Good. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Group 1.
Group 2 was Kenny, Lisa, Michael and Z.
Okay. We should
like you, Lisa.
Any should be spokesperson. I mean, we said pretty much the same thing. It's when the student maybe doesn't recognise the risk, or and they're not starting to action it as you would, or it can be sometimes if a situation develops quite quickly where you haven't had time to give any verbal, any talk through or kind of coaching or anything like that, so we've had to intervene. And then the difference between faults around the goal and faults around the risk, again, faults around the goal is more beneficial for the student to allow them to make mistakes, to self-evaluate, and for them to rectify. And faults around the risk is for us to identify and manage as the instructor, and maybe then it could be, identify it, and we could kind of pin it and say, maybe we could have a look at this. This could be a goal for next lesson. So it's not forgotten. They know that they're going to be able to go over and achieve it if they don't understand it fully this lesson.
Okay, nice. Just as a quick question, if that were to happen, while you're continuing to work on the original goal, what do you do when they come into that situation again, if you haven't had time to deal with it?
So clear with them that it might be a change of instruction. So we could help guide them through it could be a meeting situation, for example, and then obviously get them through it safely. And then on the following lesson, we can go back through it in more detail.
Perfect.
And make it a goal.
Perfect. That's perfect. Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, room 3, we had Andrew, Gary and Susan.
Okay, so not really too much more to add. So safety critical is just when we need to intervene, whether that be if we've got time verbally just to say stop, or if we have to use dual controls, etc. And then the differences, it's around setting the responsibility, has been said. So those within the goal, we're going to let them make those faults as long as it's safe for them to do so. And that's what we'll discuss when we pull over. So that's their responsibility. And then between the points where we're working on that goal, depending on the route, then we take responsibility for those risks, we manage it and ensure that those faults don't happen to the best of our ability.
Great, good,
Nice.
good.
Room 4, we've got John, Leon and Nick.
Hello. There's not a lot left to say really, but yes. Obviously, we can take things into the next lesson and have them do talk-throughs to avoid risk management or safety critical situations, i.e. on a roundabout, they might not see a situation unfolding. We might need to take the steering wheel. We might need to, divert them, as already said, because there might not be time for us to talk that through with them. And obviously, faults around the goal, they've got to make a few mistakes. So long as it isn't safety critical, that's how they're going to do their own self-learning and reflection. And faults around the risk, obviously, we might have to divert from the goal to keep those safe and go through them, and they're going to be more reactive. And we've got to manage that risk while they achieve the goal. So
that's the danger, isn't it? Because if something does happen safety critical outside of the goal, then yes, you might have to consider changing the whole lesson plan. And we don't really want to get it to that stage or that level. Yeah. So some great answers there, but there was
one more room.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
which is Sam, Scott and Susie.
You want me to go? Guess so. Exact same thing. We had, we said for safety critical, when we feel it's necessary to intervene, but considering, have we got enough time to give the instruction? Has the student got enough time to process the information before they act on it? Because if we were to leave it any later than that, then we might find ourselves in a dangerous situation.
Okay.
And then the same as everybody else, the faults around the goal is just letting it develop, see how they deal with it, give them the opportunity to make the corrections and fix it, trying to keep them on the move. And then any kind of anything around risk is direct instruction. There and then
Good.
trying to fix that.
Good, brilliant. How can we prevent something from moving into safety critical?
By ensuring,
yes, Lisa, I've got you. Go.
I think one of them would be kind of your lesson planning, so making sure your route is suitable for the task in hand or the goal that's set.
Good.
That's one of them.
Good, John.
By being proactive, really. So you should
What does
see
that
what's
mean?
coming up.
So
you
you expand
should
on
be,
that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. You should see that something's happening. I.e., they're coming up to something too fast, or they're getting too close. Rather than wait till they be starting to ask some questions about it or starting to help them, rather than let it happen and then have to change it, because that's now become safety critical.
Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. There are 4 levels of risk management, isn't there? 4 levels. And if we get the first 2 right, there should never be any need for the second 2. The first one is watch. If we are aware of our surroundings and our pupils' actions, then we know what's happening up ahead, and we know if our pupils are taking action on what you see. If they are not, there is a further stage that we can do before it goes into safety critical, and that is ask a call to action question. If you get those two bits right, if you ask them a call to action question and they respond, it is not safety critical. You've already saved it.
Yeah.
But keep an eye on it next time they go around. Yeah. Keep an eye on it. But it's not safety critical. It only becomes safety critical when you have to intervene, either verbally or physically. And then that's opening up a whole new can of worms. Because now we have to deal with it. Yeah. And that might take you away from the goal. Go on, Nick.
Keeping them tuned in to how well they need to plan, assess how far they're looking, and then giving themselves space and time to do everything will bring all of that into play and hopefully divert from.
Yeah, although what we don't, we have to accept that while they are focusing on something, things that they normally do quite well may deteriorate, and we have to just accept that. And therefore, it might just be, a bit of a prompt. How are you going to deal with this? Do you need some hand? Do you need a hand with this? Yeah. It might just be that might be enough. I mean, if they're going into situations they've never dealt with, or that you both know they have an issue with, then just talk it through. Don't wait for it to go horribly wrong. You know it's going to go wrong, so talk it through.
And have that agreement at the start of the lesson. I know you're a bit rusty on the roundabouts, and we will be facing a few of those. Do you want some help with that? Do you want a few prompts? Would you like me to talk it through? Have that conversation before it happens. But as Di said, the most important thing is watching them. Because if you're not watching them at that very early stage where it starts to go wrong, then everything becomes a real rush for you to get in there. So watching them is the most critical thing you can do, because the other thing that can go wrong is that you can forget what's within the goal, what's not within the goal, and all of a sudden you're starting instructing them through everything to try and make sure they don't get anything wrong. And you could be over helping them. You could be using the wrong level of instruction altogether. So watching
or not helping them at all.
Exactly. So watching them is the start of that absolute critical process. So, and know what you're watching them for. Jeanette, you had your hand up there.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. If you can ask a leading question, that it's important that you do it, because as you say, if it becomes verbal or physical intervention, then you've got to get the feedback from the student and all the rest of it. So competency 3 and your risk management, I think, is the most important one of all, watching the pupil.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeanette. John.
I think it's also important for them to remember that the lesson starts when they start the car, not as they approach the goal, and I think sometimes PDIs or even ADIs is that, from a test center, if we use the test center scenario, their pupil has got a lot of pressure. They've probably got the ADI sat in the back, they've got an examiner. It's more pressure than their driving test. So, we need to take into consideration to make sure, so when we pull out this test center, I know you're probably feeling a bit nervous today. So why don't I give you some coaching, get you going, i.e. the risk management side, and let's get going. Now, they're not going to say no to that.
Yeah.
But how many times do they say, right, so at the test center, turn right, and that pupil's already made 2 massive errors because they're nervous and they're not thinking like they've normally.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, John, is that a mistake people make is, the lesson starts when we get to our practice area.
Totally.
But they don't, every piece of driving should have a learning outcome. So the drive from the test center to the practice area should have a learning outcome. The same as the drive back from, every piece of driving should have a learning outcome. There is no such thing as just go for a drive.
No.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a good point. Thank you, Gary. You're muted, huh?
Sorry. A lot of
No,
it
no
has to
worries.
do with the instructor's behavior as well. So instead of us focusing just solely on the learner, we need to talk about the instructor's behavior as well, because some instructors, they've got a tendency. I fell into that trap some years ago as well, where they tried to spring a conversation on approach to a safety critical situation. And sometimes they're sat in the car with a pen in hand, or maybe busy looking at something that they're probably not supposed to be looking at, like maybe the mobile phone sometimes, or a tablet screen, or writing on something in a notepad or something, right? And that caused some distraction for the learner as well. And if you're not, ready to take action, then you might miss something very important. So a pen in hand or pen in right hand is a dangerous thing to do on approach to a safety critical situation. And try to minimize conversation, allow the learner to focus.
Yes.
Try to minimize pointing out certain unnecessary thoughts, etc. Leave the learner be, let them take control of the situation if they can. And if not, then you can interject. Yeah.
Absolutely.
PDIs holding pens is one of my pet hates.
Yeah, I seem to remember you've thrown a few of them out the window.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, you point that at me once.
Not the
more, it goes straight
PDIs,
out the
I
window.
hasten to add. Sorry, you didn't throw the PDIs out the window. The pens, the pens.
They pointed them at you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very important that watching of the pupil. You cannot get a better skill than that, because everything starts there. Everything is going to start with that pupil. And the problem with instructors, whether they're ADIs or PDIs, is you put them on that part 3 or standards check test, and all of a sudden, instead of their focus being on the pupil, a third of their focus is on the pupil, because a third of it is on themselves thinking, am I saying the right thing? Did I mean to say that? And the other third of their attention is on the person who's sat in the back, and they're thinking, what did that person think of that? Am I doing the right thing? Oh, am I going to fail for that? Oh, crikey, they're marking the sheet in the back. I can see it out the corner of my eye. I must have done something terrible. So they're using up 2/3 of their fantastic ability on thinking about the wrong things, which is themselves and the examiner in the back. Whereas on their normal lessons, all of their concentration goes on their pupil. Put them under test conditions, only 1/3 of their concentration goes on the pupil. So getting them to make that lesson all about the pupil, all about the pupil's needs, watching the pupil, helping the pupil, getting them to develop is the key. If their attention is 100% on their pupil, they are much more likely to pass than if they're starting to think about their own performance or the performance of whatever the examiner is thinking in the back.
Thank you, sir. Good. Any more questions or observations about that exercise? Everyone okay? Right. And of course, those 5 essential coaching skills are paramount, aren't they? When we're doing and talking about, because when you're dealing with risk, sometimes, particularly if you have to intervene, it could break rapport like that. So you've got to give them time, particularly if you're using dual controls, to stop and give them time to get over it and to rebuild that rapport. All right. Okay, if you'd like to read through that, and then I will read from the instructor's handbook as to the official take on it.
Sorry, I missed that. What are we reading through?
You're reading through how to use timely and appropriate verbal and physical interventions in the guidelines, guidance notes.
Has someone got a page number for Gary?
31.
Page 31 in your guidance notes, Gary.
So this is all about instructor input, isn't it?
That's a really good bit. I like that.
Yeah, because you know, in modern day driver training, you should only input if you have to input.
Mm.
You know, if you can drive in silence, then that's brilliant. Whereas the old style, we used to be talking all the time, didn't we? Which was a total distraction, and we caused more problems than which I could stick at, really. Good. Any questions on that? I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in the instructor's handbook, page 117, I'm looking at, was any verbal or physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? When stationary, any interventions would normally take the form of a dialogue with a pupil. In the moving car situation, you may need to point out anything that may be needed to prevent the potential problem from escalating. Yeah, there is your call to action question. First line. Only intervene in a way that actively supports the pupil's learning process and safety during the session. Allow the pupil to deal with situations appropriately. Take control of a situation where the pupil is clearly out of their depth. Be aware of a developing situation. Don't leave the pupil to flounder. take control of a situation the pupil is clearly dealing with. Yeah, don't take control, sorry. Don't take control of a situation the pupil is clearly dealing with appropriately. Only intervene when necessary or when appropriate and without creating distractions. Avoid undermining the pupil's confidence. Don't reinforce the feeling that the instructor is a person who is in sole control of the lesson. Okay? Dog is having a meltdown for some reason.
Guy, Lisa's got a question.
Yes, Lisa.
I don't know if this sounds a bit stupid, but I just need to get it square in my head. So
Nothing stupid.
if we're so one of our conversations in the breakout room was the goal was on progression, for example, and the student kept getting too close to the parked vehicle. So when we go to fault analysis, so obviously we identify the fault. Would we talk about that fault that took place, that we had to intervene, for example, steering around the vehicle once we've pulled up, and we do the discussion about how they went with progress?
Yes.
Or would we try and...
Okay, Lisa, I think this will be answered under one of the competencies. All right, sufficient feedback given after a safety critical incident. But basically, if you're doing short 10-minute drives,
yeah,
you pull over and the first thing you talk about is the goal.
Okay.
That's the first thing you talk about. It's priority.
Yeah.
So my first question when I pull someone over is, remind me, what was the goal?
Okay.
Because it keeps them focused and it keeps me focused on the goal.
Yeah.
When you've gone through that process of reflection and development around the goal, you can then tag on the end of it. Okay, I just want to talk about that situation where you're a little bit too close to the parked cars.
Okay.
Okay. And then you make a plan about how that's going to be dealt with the next time round.
Okay.
So there's your core comps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the move, you might say, you're a little bit close to these parked cars. Yeah. I'm just going to steer you out a little bit or whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And when you pull up, you talk about the goal.
Yeah.
And then you might say, now, you remember I had to steer you out a little bit because you're too close to those parked cars. Then you can go through the, what is the distance you should keep? How do you judge that? And then you might even say to them, would you like me to help you with that next time round?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or are you going to be able to focus on it this time?
So you'd identify the fault, and then as you pulled up, you do your analysis and then put in a remedial
It's
action.
flagging it up. Yeah. It's just flagging it up on the move.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's perfect. So I just need to put it into like an example.
Yeah.
So I just learn a bit better that way.
Yeah, that's sure. Okay, good. And it wasn't a stupid question. It was a brilliant question, by the way. Thank you very much. Okay, right. So we're all happy. Yes, Susan.
Sorry, it's on the same lines. When or if something safety critical happens, when I've done assessments, I've been advised that you should pull somebody up as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
After such a thing
Right.
happens.
It depends. Okay, Susan, it depends on the severity of what's just happened.
Yeah.
All right, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
As I say, it does come under this feedback, but the amount of feedback that you give them will depend on how much help you've agreed to give them in the first place on that particular thing.
Okay.
If they've said, no, I can handle it, then your feedback would be more than if you said that you were going to help them with it. Yeah? Does
And
that make
again,
sense?
It's just that I can just remember a situation where something's, say like they skimmed a car, they didn't go touch it, but they got too close. And I knew that I was going to be heading back, it was 100 yards to where we were going to finish. So leaving it and thinking, right, okay, now we'll need to discuss that as well. And then we said, well, we should actually have brought them up immediately, because as soon as you got round the corner, you should have stopped and said, Okay, we just need to chat quickly about this part.
Well,
that you
it had got to that point, hadn't it, Susan? It had got to that point beyond the watching them.
Yeah.
Beyond the prompting them or call to action. And it actually happened.
Yeah. It's just a bit sometimes getting that in my head as to like how urgent the scope is.
It depends, as I said, it depends on how critical it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If it's marginally critical, then let it go, you know, until you stop. If it is really critical and you were that close, then you probably need to stop a lot quicker.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
I think with that, with Susan's as well, if it was, I guess it's also making sure that the student's okay at that point, because if they've had a bit of a near miss, it is quite shaky. So like you said, the severity, if it's quite bad, they might want to actually pull over for a couple of seconds, calm down and have a chat. And I think, again, it's reading your student in that scenario as well and just checking in and saying, you okay? And making sure that they are, if they've had like a bit of a near miss, I guess.
Good advice. Good advice. Thank you, Lisa. All right, anything else? All good. Lovely. All right. Okay. So let's move on then to these how to use effective questioning techniques. We looked at different types of questions and their uses, and we looked at some examples last time. And within that conversation, we were saying that quite often open questions are used when we're asking people's opinions about something or their feelings about something. So generally, it's things that we don't know the answer to. Yep, generally. So we are taking these questions the next stage, because rather than training people to pass a test, old style, we're now actually training people for beyond the test. And we do that by using scenarios, real life scenarios. Okay. So to give you an example of that, I'm going to give you a scenario. All right. And we're going to pop you into breakout rooms. And between you, you can come up with some questions that you might ask to raise my awareness. Okay. Okay, so the scenario is the subject of drink driving came up, and you've said to me, so do you think it's okay just to have a couple of pints and then drive? And I've come back to you and said, well, sometimes you have no choice, do you? Sometimes, you know, you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no other way of getting home. So sometimes you have to. So yeah, I think it's all right. My mum and dad always used to do it. All right. So that is my belief right now, that it's perfectly okay to have a couple of pints and then, or two or a few, as long as I feel okay, it's all right. No? So that's my view at the moment. Okay. So I would like you to come back with some questions that you could hold a conversation with me. You could trial them out on each other if you want to, see if it actually works. Okay. So I want you to come back with some questions for me to try to influence that belief without telling me I'm going to lose my license if I do it, because that doesn't work. Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, everybody understand? Yep, fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to give you plenty of time for this. I'm going to give you another 15 minutes. The time will go really quickly, okay? But I want you to come back with questions of how you can change my attitude. I think it's okay to have 2 pints or a few pints, as long as I feel okay to jump in my car and drive, particularly if I'm out in the country somewhere. All right?
Okay, 15 minutes. Anyone got any questions before we go? Fabulous. When we come back, we'll go around the groups in a question at a time and see who can change Di's actual attitude and belief.
Good luck.
Okay. It's a bit ingrained, this belief, so be careful there. Yeah, but if you, the more ideas you have, the better at being able to come up with.
Try to think about what responses you might get and be ready to ask another question. So that's why I say try it out on each other, see if it actually works.
Cool. See you all in 15.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Right then.
Firstly, does anyone think drink driving is okay? Does anyone have the same view as
Of course
Di?
it is.
Yes.
I recommend
on a
it.
Friday night only.
Yeah, Friday nights are my only nights.
I highly recommend it. It helps you get through the day, doesn't it?
A shot after every student.
Leo Flask.
Yeah.
Tempting sometimes. Okay.
You could ask them if they know what the effects of alcohol are on your reaction.
That's my first question.
Yeah.
Yeah. What could be the effects of drinking on your drive home?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You could also ask them if they were aware of how many units, because England's different from Scotland, I believe, in terms of how many units that you are allowed to consume before it has a legal effect. But you might also ask them, would you just take it? Would you take that limit up to that limit? Would you drink up to that limit, or try to drink up to the limit? And then maybe come back with another answer to say, well, that limit might be a different effect on, say, a woman, a man, or maybe your size, how much you've ate, and so forth. Yeah.
I think it also as well, drinking depends on what you've eaten, what your mental state's like on that day.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that can change your ability to be able to handle.
I think when you ask these type of questions, you're almost trying to tap into their emotions a little bit, because you can say to somebody, well, the speed limit is 30, but if they're in a rush to get home,
they'll justify it. They'll justify it at 35.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to ask a question like, imagine you were walking along the road, or you were crossing the road with a loved one, and somebody was approaching who had been drinking heavily.
Yeah.
How would you feel? Yeah.
How would you feel if a loved one? Yeah. And who would you blame? Because if he's willing to go out, I say he, could be a she. If they are willing to go out and drink, you get there's some drivers that are the ones that it will never happen to me kind of attitude. I won't ever get caught. But who would you blame if it was a loved one that got hit? And if you would blame the drink driver, then why would you put yourself in that situation for that to happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could maybe ask them, I think Di touched on it, is there ever a situation where it is not so much permissible, but in your belief, just say that your friend was out in the middle of nowhere and they were in a dangerous situation and you've been out that night and they phoned you to come for them, would you put yourself in a position whereby you would jump in your car knowing that you were just over the limit to go and help that person? So maybe we give a scenario to see what their beliefs were.
Yeah, and on that, asking would they get in the car with someone that they knew was drunk?
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, very good point.
Maybe you can ask them if they know anybody who has been involved in a collision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other one then is,
sorry, Lisa.
no, it's I was just going to say, flipping it around. So if they did go through with it and they hit somebody, do they think they'd be able to live with those consequences? Because I know I couldn't, especially, you know, anyone, but if it was a child, for example, you know, you need to kind of pull on their heartstrings if they've got any.
Yeah, if they killed or seriously injured somebody.
Yeah. So that said, what we're trying to do is tapping into, because most of our beliefs have been, you know, come from our parents, our uncles, you know, maybe our peers as well. So maybe by asking that question, you're seeing what their beliefs are in terms of,
yeah,
you know, taking that risk. Because if they've seen their dad lose their license a couple of times, and well, maybe would you say, if they came back and said, oh yeah, my dad lost his license and such a couple of years ago, and because of that, did he lose his license? Did he lose his job? What were the ramifications? And maybe try to get them to give instances whereby, you know, it's going to be really detrimental to their everything, not only being caught and being fined and license being taken off them. What would the after effects, the aftershocks, the after be the consequences be thereafter?
Yeah, and I think it's Jamie reminded me of it last lesson. I think last course was fog. So you know, what makes you believe it's okay, and is it factual? Is it opinion, or guess? Is it something that they've grown up with and they've seen parents do it all the time, or is it something they believe to be okay as long as you're within a certain limit, or they quite frankly don't care? I mean, I've never been on a drink driving course, but I have been on a couple of courses when I was younger, and I think a lot of it they're trying to make you realise, for example, is like if you do get into a crash, do you know that your petrol tank's in the middle of the car? So if the car ignites, the fire starts from the middle. So if you've got a child in the back seat, you can't reach that child. And that was one of the points for me that stood out the most. And I mean, I did this course 15, 16 years ago. And that's the only thing I really remember from that was that. And I think it depends on the pupil as well. You know, if they've got a family, It's did you know that? Did you know that you wouldn't be able to get to your child? You know, you'd probably be passed out at the wheel. You know, it's not just your life it affects.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
are people more likely to pass out if they've had, like, for example, if there is like a collision, are they more likely to pass out if they've had the alcohol in their system? Would you know?
I think it depends, really. You find that most drunk people actually walk away from an incident less injured than the other person that maybe hadn't been drinking. I think that's a lot of like the I want to say like the anesthetic and the numbing effect that alcohol gives the body. It's almost like it doesn't go into shock and things like that. And I think a lot of the time, if you're in an accident and you're injured, it's kind of the shock of that injury that takes you out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, a lot of these questions that we've come up with are the similar questions that were on my my driver awareness course. So I got caught on my mobile when I was young. Long time ago. But and I hadn't long passed. My attitude to driving was very different. So I've definitely seen it from both sides. I've been on speed awareness. I've been on driver awareness. I wasn't born an ADI, I can tell you that much.
You were a tearaway, weren't you?
I was then, yeah. I was a little, I was a girl racer. I got caught doing too high speed in a fencing. Yeah, that was a nightmare. But I would say the course has actually benefited me because when I passed, my instructor didn't teach me the consequences of actions and stuff, just how to drive and pass the test. It was actually the courses that taught me how to become a responsible driver and the consequences if you're not. So they definitely do their job.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of these questions are pretty much what they get you to think about. They think about the emotional pull on somebody. Everyone's got at least someone that they love, even if it's a bloody animal.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you can ask them. You can ask them if they, you know, is alcohol worth more than someone's life? You know, having a drink.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever had any trouble with getting students to do an emergency stop abruptly enough?
Yeah.
Do you use the imagine it's your loved one crossing the road?
Yeah.
So yeah, it hits you a little bit different when you personalize stuff like that.
Yeah, I always say, look, I said, it's not nice to think about it. I said, but this is why we do an emergency stop, is to preserve someone's life. I said, imagine it was one of your loved ones and somebody was traveling down the road. How quickly would you want them to stop?
Yeah. I drove my trainer mad because I must have done about 8 and he's like, for God's sake, Lisa, just, do you know what I mean? You need to be a bit more aggressive. And I was like, oh, I don't want to. And then he was like, you know, who do you love the most? And I was like, well, my daughter, obviously. And he was like, all right, imagine she's crossing the road. And I slammed on my brakes. He said, I should have asked you to do that like 8 attempts ago. I was like, rah. But it works every time. Even if it's a bloody dog that they prefer.
Yeah.
Teenage boy who's not a big fan of mom and dad at the moment, but he's got a dog he loves.
Yeah, because I've mentioned like, oh, you know, imagine it was your brother. They're like, I'd probably put my foot down.
I've had a few do that. Oh, back, sorry.
I said, no, you need to think of someone you actually care about.
Do you have someone you like? Let's maybe start there then.
Right then, do you want me to be the spokesperson for this next one?
I think so. I took one from Steve last time.
I knew you were going to say that.
Especially us last time, and then everyone stayed mute, so I was like...
Yeah, I like Lisa, she really took the lead on this one. She can have it. But yeah, I'll take charge of this one.
Fab.
I think, Michael, you're going to get away with not having to do one today.
Okay, I'll do the next one.
No,
Next week or the week after.
when we're not in the same group and he
Yes.
I've got
I'll
these.
ask not to be put in the same group as you two next week or on Thursday.
Yeah, I've got these recorded, so I'm gonna refresh my memory of who said what.
You're going to do a tally on who.
Yeah.
How do you record these sessions? See, what button do you hit in the computer?
There's nothing within Zoom, but there's a piece of software you can get. It's called OBS, and you can get it to record various things. So the screen and the audio is one of those things.
Okay.
I think I can't remember what OBS stands for. It's like open source something. But you can also connect it to like a console and record gameplay. That's what I got it for initially for my son. He wanted to start doing like YouTube videos and stuff.
Okay.
But you can connect up to your phone, up to like a camera, and you can record it by the software. It's really useful.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Well, it is for us in this instance. Thank you.
No worries.
We're all back in the room. Look at that. I hope whoever groups Kenny arrived at, you're able to catch him up a little bit on what was happening for the last 5 minutes. If not, hopefully you got the gist there, Kenny. Because now we're going to convince Di not to drink and drive.
I can't wait.
And we're going to start with room 5, which is Sam, Scott, and Susie. What is your first? Okay, Gary, no problem. See you soon. Okay, what is your first question to Di that's going to help her to not drink and drive?
I'll go if you want, Scott.
Yeah.
Sorry. What do you think it will do to your insurance when you're caught?
Why am I going to get caught? Nobody ever gets caught for drinking and driving.
Okay,
Couple
room
of pints.
4. Room 4. John, Leon, and Nick. Who's got a question for Di?
Okay, Di. So you're thinking about drinking and driving.
Well, only having a couple of pints, Leon. Not.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your reasoning? Why do you need to drive?
Well, why not? I'll go to a country pub. It'd be all right, wouldn't it?
Okay, room 3. Room 3. One question for Di. Andrew, Kenny, and Susan.
Okay, Di. So what is the legal drink drive limit?
I have no idea.
Okay, room 2. Lisa, Michael, and Z.
How would you feel if your loved one was hit by a drink driver? Who would you blame?
Well, the driver, of course. The driver, of course.
How would you feel about that?
That's 2 questions, sorry. Room 1, Jamie, Jeanette, Penny, and Sue.
Right, Di, what are the consequences of getting into a car after having had a drink?
What are the consequences?
Mm-hmm.
What are the consequences? I don't really understand your question. Can you, I don't know there would be any, would there?
Okay, room 5. You can follow up on your previous question or ask another one based on what other people have asked. So Sam, Scott, and Susie.
Is it okay if we take a look at the consequences, Di, together?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Room 4, John, Leon, and Nick.
Are you aware of what the law is in regards to drink driving?
Yeah, you can't drink and drive.
Room 3, Andrew, Kenny, and Susan.
Would you be happy to drive your mum home after you had a couple of drinks?
Well, yeah, she does it anyway. She's always done it.
Room 2, Lisa, Michael, and Z.
Would you get in the car with someone if you knew they were drunk, or would you allow a loved one in the car with a drunk driver?
No, not a drunk driver. I'm not going to be drunk after 2 pints, am I?
Room 1, Jamie, Jeanette and Sue.
So, Di, how does one drink actually affect you?
Personally, a bit like drinking a can of Coke, really. I don't really feel the effect at all.
Room 5, Sam, Scott and Susie. Tell us if you give up. If your group gives up, that's fine.
No. How will it if you? Oh, sorry, when you get caught?
When I get caught, why am I going to get caught?
Room 4, John, Leon, and Nick.
How would you feel if you had a visit from the police and one of your loved ones was killed by a driver who'd only had a couple of pints?
I'd be very surprised.
Okay, next group. Room 3, Andrew, Kenny and Susan.
I'd like to have a chat with somebody whose sister was killed by somebody who'd only had 2 pints.
Sorry, can you repeat that for me, Kenny?
Would you like to have a chat with someone whose sister was killed by someone who only had 2 pints? And see the effect
Would I
it's had on
like to have
them?
a chat with them?
Yeah.
Not particularly, no.
Oh, well.
Room 2, Lisa, Michael and Z.
Do you know anyone, maybe a family member or anyone who's a friend who's lost their license, and what was the consequences of that?
Yeah, I did, but I mean, yeah, but he was stupid. I mean, he went out and he was tanked. And he still got in his car and drove. I mean, I wouldn't do that.
I would
Room
ask
1,
a question.
Room 1, Jamie, Jeanette and Sue.
Would it affect your capability of stopping?
Yeah, actually, I suppose my reactions might be a bit slower, mightn't they?
Room 5, Sam, Scott and Susie. Anyone else helping Susie? Are Sam or Scott gonna ask a question here? That any of that group can. The clock is ticking.
Jeanette's helped you.
Room 4, John, Leon or Nick.
How will you feel when you do kill somebody?
I'm not going to kill anyone. I've only had a couple of pints.
You will.
Room 3, Andrew, Kenny and Susan.
So you said that it will slow your reactions down. So
Probably, yeah, I would think so.
So do you think it's still a good idea to do it?
Yeah, but not by loads. I mean, only a little bit.
Room 2, Lisa, Michael and Z.
So you recognise that your reactions may be affected. So if something happened all of a sudden, do you think you'd have the effective reactions to be able to deal with that after having a couple of pints?
All of a sudden? No, probably not, actually.
Room 1, Jamie, Jeanette and Sue.
How is your hearing affected if you've had a couple of pints?
My steering?
Your hearing.
It's been affected now.
It's bad already. I'm deaf. I wear 2 bloody hearing aids.
It's
not good, I wouldn't
to be affected.
Might be overconfident.
Can't be affected much more, Jeanette.
Okay, final question. This has got to be your, as it were, killer question. This is really going to change our mind. So room 5, Sam or Scott or Susie? Ooh, Scott looks like he's jumping in there.
I'm still thinking, but I'm thinking the 2 answers that Dice gave. I don't know how to word it though. Nah, it was around stopping distances, something like that, but nah, I don't know.
Room 4, John, Leon or Nick? Your last killer question. John's got nothing. Nick, anything? Leon? We've got nothing. Room 3, Andrew, Kenny and Susan.
So if
it takes you longer to stop, how are you going to miss that person walking into the road?
Probably wouldn't actually.
That's what I was going to ask Susan.
Ooh. Room 2, Lisa, Michael, Z.
And after you've hit that person that you were unable to stop for, that you didn't see, how do you think you'd be able to live with the consequences?
Yeah, I think I'll be pretty unhappy actually. I think if I did that, I probably wouldn't get in a car.
Room 1, Jamie, Jeanette and Sue.
Reaction times.
Yeah.
What about them?
That's 2 drinks. How does it affect your reaction time? Oh, I said that before, didn't I?
You said that it's slower.
How does it affect your perception?
Well, I've already said I'll be pretty hacked off if I ran somebody over. So I don't know that we need to go backwards now, really. I think you're getting there now.
You are getting there. Right. One last question from anyone in the room. Stick your hand up if you've got a question. Nick, go for it. This is the last question.
So now they're dead and you're going to jail. Was it worth the drink?
No, probably not. That's a bit extreme.
Well, good question. Good question. Thank you, guys. Very well done.
There is absolutely no point in throwing rules and regulations at me. Me. Yeah, the only thing that is going to change my opinion is getting to me, getting to my feelings. Yeah, getting to my understanding. That's the only way you're going to change it, right? Now, we're going to give you a bit of an example. I'm going to get with you in a minute, Penny. Just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. You're all driving instructors. Stick your hand up if you would ever consider drinking and driving. You would, Leon?
We've got one for Leon. Anyone else?
You've heard it before, haven't you?
Nick
You've been here before.
And
Leon.
Okay, for those of you that would never drink and drive, are you certain you would never drink and drive?
Yep.
Yep, we got yeps.
Whatever you do.
Certain.
Yes, but if somebody was dying, and the only thing to get them to hospital.
Okay, okay. We'll come to that in a minute, Susan. Interesting.
No, if I was driving, my partner was driving, he had a heart attack, I might just walk over and take him if there wasn't any other. But I don't drink much anyway, so I'll probably be fine.
That is a great example, Susan, and we will attack that one. All right.
Yeah.
We will attack that one. So that's a great example.
There you are. You're driving down the road with your partner. Your partner is the one who is the driver. They've had nothing to drink. You are not drunk, but you're over the limit, but you're still perfectly capable. And then you look at your partner and the car's slowing down and it comes to a stop and you look at them and their face has fallen and they're mumbling and you go, "You okay?" And they go, I don't know. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You can see that this is the first sign of your partner having a stroke. You know how crucial it is that they get treatment within that first magic hour as to how much of a person you're going to be left with. You look at your mobile phone, you've got absolutely no signal, nothing. What are you going to do? You know that the nearest hospital is a 5-minute drive away. Who still wouldn't drink and drive? Who is still so confident that they would not swap seats and drive that car to get their partner to hospital?
Thinking the moment.
My God, we're all now driving instructors who would drink and drive, aren't we? Because we've now been given an exceptional circumstance that you're suddenly thinking for the first time, hang on, if that is actually happening, if that was happening, then, oh my God, I might drink and drive. But because we can now sit in this room and think about it in the cold light of day, what other alternatives could I have?
Well, you would look around and see if there was like passing traffic or there was a building or something, but...
So passing traffic, yeah? Would that help us?
Well, if we could get them to stop.
Yeah, flag them down, see if they've got a phone signal, get an ambulance or ask them to drive. What about buildings nearby? How would that help us?
Well, if there's people, you could get to them and get a phone, get to a landline.
Absolutely, another option.
You could take the handbrake off and push the car, but that might take a while.
Okay. How many of you have different mobile networks from your partner?
Yeah. Yeah, we
Lots
do.
of people do. Did anyone think, oh my God, I haven't got a signal? Did I think, oh, maybe my partner's got a signal? I probably wouldn't in the panic.
How many of you have got iPhones that have got an emergency?
Just going to say that.
Yeah, I've
You can
also
always
got
get a
on my
999 call.
Yeah, on my car there's an SOS button as
Mine
well.
too.
There you go,
Mine too.
SOS on your car. Yeah, there is all kinds of other ways around this problem.
Yeah.
And because we're sitting and discussing it, if we're ever in that situation, we might well find another solution to driving drunk. Yeah. However, if we never think about that scenario and we're suddenly in it, all of a sudden we are definitely going to make a bad decision. I mean, I've got 15, 16 driving instructors in front of me all saying they're going to drink drive. Well, I'm not going to be advertising that on Facebook. Put a screenshot up. All of these driving instructors have admitted to me this morning they'd happily drink drive. No, but again, it's because you're in that moment. Now, with your PDIs, they're going to be having these kind of discussions with young, vulnerable learners. And young, vulnerable learners are very impulsive in the moment. So you've got a 17-year-old girl who's just passed her test and she's gone to a house party, taking her 3 friends in the car, very sensible driver, driven there lovely. They've got to the party and they're all going to be staying the night. So she knows she can have a drink and then in the morning she can drive them all home when they've all sobered up. However, having had 3 drinks, a fight breaks out at the party. And one of the girls is so terrified and said, look, we can't stay, please just drive us home, We got to get home because this is really scary. Now, what's that 17-year-old girl going to do? In the moment, Nick.
No.
In the moment, she's going to be like we were a few minutes ago. We're going to go, well, this is more important than that drink driving law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if we have that discussion with her in the cold light of day and say, well, okay, what were your other alternatives? Oh, yeah, I could try a taxi, but I wouldn't have any money on me because I'd just be at my mate's house. Okay, who would have money? What would your parents prefer? You turning up in a taxi and going, Dad, I'm ever so sorry, can you pay for it? Or the police knocking on the door saying, I'm very sorry, sir, but there's been an accident. Yeah, Lisa.
My daughter's only 10 and we got onto the topic. I think my wife must have come home drunk one night in the taxi and we were laughing at her and we got into a conversation. And from the age of 10, she already knows that if there's a situation arises when she's out with her friends, when she's older, she needs to know that she can phone home. I'd rather get a phone call at 2 asking me to go and get her, get a phone call from the police saying that she'd been in a car with a drunk driver.
Absolutely.
So we've already started those conversations.
Brilliant. I mean,
there's another question.
Yeah, sorry, Di.
But there's another question, Lisa.
Yeah.
What would you do if you and your wife had already shared a bottle of wine and you got that phone call?
Then I'd phone the taxi to go and get her.
Cool.
Good. And you've thought about it in advance, yeah?
Yeah. But
Which
I
is
think
lovely.
when it's your child,
yeah,
those instincts already come in. So I think when we're teaching other people's children, they kind of need to do the same thing.
Exactly, and help them with these scenarios, because they won't intend. I mean, if you go out this afternoon, say to all of your pupils, will you ever drink drive? How many of them are going to say yes? Yeah, I'd drink and drive. None of them. They're all going to be going, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to drive drunk. I'm never going to drive under the influence of drugs, because they believe that's the question that you're asking. Is that morality question? You're not dealing with their thoughts and feelings and putting that into a scenario. And it's those scenarios that help them to weigh up options when they do get to those crisis moments. And it's really important that your PDIs, when you're training them, they can then go on and have those kind of conversations with their students. Because students, you know, as I say, they will tell you what they think you want to hear if you don't explore their thoughts and feelings. Yeah, because most people all set out with the right intention, and then life gets in the way. Something comes along and the intention that they had is now out the window. Yeah, a well-known fact of the greatest cause of death in young women is boyfriends. Yeah. And it's not boyfriends beating them up and murdering them. It's boyfriends who wrap the car around a tree and they die.
Yeah.
Greatest cause of death of young women, being in a car as a passenger with a boyfriend. Jeanette?
I always have that conversation with my young learners, always, because we think about scenarios about how we can get the person to stop. You know, if they're driving too fast, or if they have been drinking, or, you know, how are you going to deal with it? You know, so that they've got that strategy to hand before, you know, if that situation ever comes up.
One of the suggestions I always used to make to my students was, if they are in their fella's car and they feel that they're driving dangerously, or they feel that they're under the influence and they don't want to be in it, the best thing that they can ever do is say, oh my God, I'm going to be sick, I'm going to be sick. Yeah, because no young lad wants vomit all over their car, and they will stop.
I've never
Much
come
more than
across
going,
it.
I'm scared. I'm scared just produces a I'll scare you more reaction.
More, yeah.
Nick?
I've never come across a better one than I'm going to be sick yet.
Yeah, it stops the car.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Nick?
I've got you, Lisa and Penny. So, Lisa, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I had Nick there, Di, first.
Oh, right, Lisa was first.
Oh, okay, Lisa.
No, I was going to say, I was talking to my group earlier, and I definitely wasn't born an ADI. I have been on a couple of courses over the years before becoming this, and they do really actually work. And my driving instructor didn't get me to think about, when I was taught, he didn't teach me the bigger picture of consequences. That's what the course did. And because I wasn't taught like that, I did get caught on a mobile phone and different things, and speeding. And I think, drawing on that, my experiences, I definitely bring that into my car now for the consequences. And I think having a more grounded conversation with a student, knowing the consequences of it, makes it a bit easier, to be honest.
Exactly. And it's having that honest conversation where you're not judging them. Where, you know, it's well, what happens if you ever are in that situation?
Yeah.
It's those kind of conversations that you need to have. It's because they will always say, you know, no, I won't use my phone, I won't drink and drive, I won't use drugs, I won't speed. You know, all of these things that they're telling you is because they think it's because that's what you want to hear.
Yeah.
You know, it's because they think you're judging them. But having scenario type conversations helps them to explore their own thoughts and see the dangers for themselves, that they might fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Nick?
I always ask mine, why do they think more passengers die in car crashes than drivers? And you know, they have to start thinking about it. And usually it does kill the girlfriend because the boy's driving. And it's because you're driving towards the tree and you think, shit, I'm going to die. And your natural reaction is to turn away, and your passenger gets it. And then they start thinking, oh, I don't want my girlfriend to die. And it impacts it, you know, puts it into their head.
Yeah, and the bravado of not wearing seatbelts as well. And girls who don't want to wear seatbelts because it's going to muck up their outfit where they're going out, and they've just got this nice new top and it's going to be creased, so they don't put a seatbelt on. All of those things. You know, it's those kind of situations where they will always have the right answer until you actually give them a scenario.
Yeah.
Eddie.
We had a situation 2 weeks ago. A 20-year-old died because the partner hit the tree. Her friend that was in the back is in critical care still after 2 weeks. So that's been a few of my students knew her. She lived in my village.
Never argue with trees. They don't move.
That's it. Yeah.
No, trees
so
don't move.
Yeah, a big topic of conversation just recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I had a power cut before, that's why I disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, you say to pupils, you know, would you rather crash into a brick wall or a tree? They'd normally say a tree, because a tree is a friendly thing. It's a kind thing. A brick wall is nasty, yeah, but a tree is lovely and it's got leaves and, you know, it's all nature and all of that. But a brick wall will crumble and the car will still be there. A tree, you tow the car out of the tree is still standing. They are incredibly the wrong thing to ever impact with a car. They just do not move.
Scott, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener for me, this one. Just when you said that, because I just had a 17-year-old girl had her first lesson last week, and that's exactly what she said. She says, "Oh, my friend's just passed the test," which was unrelated to the story, but she just went out with her boyfriend, a Fiesta ST, and he crashed it with his girlfriend in it. And she says, my best friend now, she's no longer with the guy, she's dumped him. I says, are they okay? He says, well, they went to hospital, they were injured, but nothing serious. But then she showed me the picture of the car, and I'm amazed that they are actually alive. Like, it was just told. So yeah, that's I like this conversation. I've never thought about it before, but I'll remember the sick one, and I'll mention that to her.
And it's the same when you're talking to those drivers. I mean, quite often lads, you know, who, if you say to them, will you speed? They will say no. Yeah. But give them a scenario. You know, you're late for your football match. You're giving a lift to 3 of your mates. They don't want to be late. Yeah. They're now telling you that you're driving like Miss Daisy. They're now yelling at you to speed up and get an effing move on. They're saying you're driving terrible because you're not exceeding the speed limit. How pressured are you in that situation to drive faster? How pressured are you when you're on the motorway with your friends and they go, haven't you ever done a ton? Oh, for God's sake, everyone's done at least a ton. What do you mean you've never done a ton? Yeah, how pressured do they feel? Help them have the coping mechanism away from the situation so that when the situation arises, they can keep themselves safe. You telling them will not keep them safe.
Exactly. I was going to say, one key thing to remember is do not preach at them.
Do not tell them what to do.
It doesn't work because they just shut their ears and they have that bias of it's never going to happen to me. There's no point. Yeah, so get to what's going on inside. You know, great conversation. We can see how that works now. Yeah, okay. Talking about people driving too fast to country roads. I remember being out in the middle of nowhere in this windy little road, and there was a guy standing at the side of the road on his mobile phone. And I thought, that's a bit odd. He's out in the middle of nowhere. And I looked up, and it was on this bend. And I looked up, and there was a Porsche on the first branches of a tree.
At 8 foot up, wasn't it?
8 foot up, and it obviously hit this bank, taken off, and landed in the tree. Incredible. Good. Okay, so great conversation, guys. Thank you very much. So it's just keeping that in mind. All right, don't preach. Get to those thoughts and feelings. All of this is in the theory of planned behavior, which is why we gave it to them in their online material. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Have a very quick read through there, then, and we'll just finish up. All right, everyone happy? Good. All right. So just to finish up then, make sure you go back to the course books, make sure their action plans make sense to them, tick off the progress records, and then fill out your feedback forms. All right.
When do we meet again, Di?
Thursday, I believe.
Cool.
Yes, Lisa.
Just a quick one. So when filling out the ADI, is it 21T?
Yep.
Now, obviously, I did speak to Graham about this when we did the initial train the trainer course, and obviously the form's really quite old school. So that was how my trainer did it. He structured the lessons based on what was on the form. Obviously, this course doesn't necessarily follow it like that. So do we just make sure that they've completed the course and tick off the sheet?
Yes.
As a bit of a tick box.
Yes, it's a bit of a dream sheet. They have to actually change legislation to update the sheet, which means it has to go through Parliament. And as you can imagine, with things going on at the moment, it's right down the bottom of the list. So that sheet is going to be in place for a long time to come. So we know it's not PSTs anymore, but if you do the ticket course, then you can confidently fill it out. Just make sure that the hours add up. Yeah, and every box is ticked.
Okay.
And that it was completed in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
If it falls just outside of the 6 months, you've got two options really. Be a little bit creative and make sure the dates come into the 6 months, or if they were a long time out of the 6 months, add another session and bring it into the 6 months. All right.
That session can be Zoom or in person.
Yeah.
And if they're sitting on, so I've got my PDI sitting on one of the, well, she's doing the two on point, lesson planning and risk management.
Yep.
So they all go towards kind of
CPD.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Sorry, we ran over,
Thursday.
but we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Won't see you Thursday. Got to take my daughter to hospital. So
Oh,
okay.
Next
Good luck with
week
that.
after.
hopefully,
Brilliant.
fingers crossed.
Cool.
Bye.
That's it. Bye.
Sarah, before
Yes.
before you guys disappear, the session for this evening, is it on assessment? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. I've not actually booked in on that, but if I do book in, would I still be able to join on to that?
Yes, you will. Yeah, there's still space on there.
Perfect.
So you'd need to do that now, Z,
Yeah.
so that I can make sure that you're getting the link through, because the link goes out at 2:30.
All right. I'll
So
do that.
if you do that now, then I can make sure you get that link.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. Cheers for that.
Brilliant. No worries.
Okay.
Cheers.
See you later,
Take
guys.
care.
Bye-bye.
See you then. Bye.